Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today, I have the pleasure of present Tuuli Toivonen. She's professor at the Department of Geoscience and Geography, and also the Helsinki Institute of Sustainability Science of Helsinki. And also, she's the director of Digital Geography Lab.
That's right.
And she's going to present the project MOBICON, which is understanding interaction of people and nature using data. So thank you for coming, Tuuli.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Well, thanks for having me or having us. So from our project also Matti Hestuakka is present, and it's really nice to be overall visiting, and particularly thanks for Matthias for all the collaboration that we've had over the recent times. So we are now collaborating on a workshop that we are organizing here in Las Palmas next week, and I'll mention that briefly as well. But maybe first a few words about our work overall, and then I thought that I would present to you two different projects that I thought that might be interesting. So MOBICON, which is indeed related to understanding people in nature in natural areas, but then another one which is more related to urban areas, urban sustainability and interactions between the environment and urban people, because we are working with that project here in Las Palmas as well. So I thought that might be interesting. And of course, here in TIDES you have a lot of background from various different disciplines. So a multidisciplinary team in here, or multidisciplinary group of researchers. So that's very interesting setting for us to be interacting with as well, because of course that's the only way of doing interesting work, which is through interdisciplinary discussions. But maybe a bit about our group first, so that you know that what is our angle to different questions. So our group is called Digital Geography Lab. So we indeed work with digital data mostly to understand spatial patterns of people mostly. So mobilities of people, dynamics of people, and interactions of people between each other, between people and places, and then between people and their environment or nature. That's the broad sort of framing of our work, and we sort of try to be doing everything in such a way that we would be, when analyzing people and their activities using digital media, we would be also contributing somehow to the knowledge that is needed to be fighting the sustainability challenges that the societies or the humanity is facing. So that's sort of the undertone of all of our work in the Digital Geography Lab. And at the moment, like just still to understand the breadth, as I'll show a bit what we have been doing for the whole team as well. So we are at the moment 20-25, depending a bit how one counts. In this team. So we work in different projects. We have, I think, 11 projects running at the moment, and people are employed in those projects then. I'm the professor leading the lab, but then there are more senior people as well who have also their own projects within the lab. But almost everyone is working on so-called soft money, so it's project-based. So whatever projects we start, that's also a bit directing our directions of the work. And maybe I thought that of sort of starting with this slide, the actual contents of what I'm going to talk about today. And if you look at it, you can be recognizing what it is, isn't it? It's a map of the world. And if we think, okay, so you're there, we are here in Helsinki, that you might know without any problem. But then if you start to be looking at it a bit more in detail, like the shades, the more bright, the more intense is the thing which is there. So you might start seeing that it's sort of the population density of the world, isn't it? Sort of, but not quite. You start when looking at it more clearly, you see that there's something which is also not matching. Africa, for example, not showing much at all. Can anyone guess what this is? Yes?
I believe our pictures uploaded to any kind of social network, maybe?
Very good, yes. So this is indeed pictures or posts uploaded to Instagram in 2 weeks' time. Like two weeks is the time frame where we downloaded these. And this is already old because Instagram doesn't allow you to be using the data anymore. So there was which you might remember, almost 10 years back, there was a crisis called Cambridge Analytica when it was apparent that Instagram's data had been used to profile people before the US elections and then feeding them targeted advertisement about the candidates, and then after that came apparent, so then Instagram and many of the Meta platforms closed the access to the data for researchers. Private companies can still be profiling people and buying the data, but Instagram closed, which is a pity because according to our studies, we know that Instagram is out of those social media data or social media platforms that exist at the moment in the Western world. So those Instagram posts are the best representation or representative of people for real, at least in areas where we really can be comparing the real statistics of people's presence, say in national parks, where there is like counting of people entering, and then we have the posts from a certain platform. And we know that Instagram is really good, has a good representation of numbers of people if you sort of use it cleverly, so it would be lovely to be studying it, but that's out of our access at the moment. We do have data from 2014 and 15, the full global coverage for those years, but anymore it's not accessible. But still, this just tells about what kind of digital footprint do we all leave with our activities. Whether you're on Instagram, you would be presented in here if you were posting something within those 2 weeks. But there's many other activities, of course, that we do with our mobile phones that then produce data somewhere that can be used in various different ways. And this is just a tiny example of that. And this is what our research groups tries to be taking advantage of, so to be analyzing these different digital footprints of people, but also to be very critical about those data sources. So to be analyzing critically the data sources as such, that whether they are reliable, representative descriptors of people's presence or activities or preferences or sentiments, which is what they have been used for. And then also to be thinking that how these digital footprints that people make or digital posts, so how they actually influence the real geographies as well. So if Matthias is an influencer here in Canary Islands and you post something about an exciting place, so then people rush into that place after you, in a way, like inspired by you potentially, and then that can be creating like new geographies in real life as well. And those are the things that we are interested in this realm. And we have been using, as said, so social media data, Instagram, Twitter or X and Flickr, but then also smartphone data, transactional data from like other smartphone data, then transactional data from mobile phone operators, and then different types of consumption data as well in some regions. For example, to understand multi-local living, so people spending time not in their homes, but say in their summer cottages, which is a strong culture in the Finnish context, that people go to their summer cottages or second homes. But it's difficult to know when they are there or which places are occupied. There are no statistics of that. There are statistics of houses, yes, but there are no statistics of us being here at the moment and not in our homes. And then, for example, electricity consumption is one of those surrogates that we have been using in certain area in Finland to be understanding the use of second homes, which is otherwise very difficult to understand. So basically we work on these kind of alternative statistics, if you will. So having good knowledge about the existing data which is collected by authorities about people in different contexts, say tourism, population, so forth, but then trying to be seeing if these different data sources have something new to offer to our understanding. And the context that we have been using these data for broadly in our group is to be understanding dynamics and mobilities of people. So, for example, this is Helsinki here, the animation, Helsinki region at large, 1.1 million people living in that area. And we know exactly who lives in which house with our registry data. But of course, people are not in their homes during the daytime. And this is then based on mobile phone data on 250-meter grid squares. We have placed them in our hourly slots to be seeing that where are they in different times of the day, which of course, for example, for service planning or seeing the equities of people to access different services or use of green spaces or so forth is very useful when you can really have this kind of dynamic population, either on very short term, like 24 hours, as in this case, or then for example, this COVID, of course, changed the patterns in Finland as well, and people escaped from the cities. Helsinki is here, and went to these other places where there was increase of population during COVID, and those are exactly the municipalities having most summer cottages. So people went to the summer cottages, even if it was not allowed. So we were instructed to stay home. There was even a closure of this region that people from the capital wouldn't be escaping. So the borders were closed, but still just before that was done, people went to the summer cottages, and this mobile phone data which is used here demonstrates that kind of activity. Then we have been indeed using this to be making dynamic models of accessibility to understand dynamically that who has access to what kind of services. For example, we've studied urban diversity and segregation in one project with these approaches, linking these spatial locations derived from social media data and from registry data also to different attributes like language. So when people post on social media on a certain language, for example, they write in Finnish or they write in Spanish or they write in Arabic, we are able from the content automatically to be analyzing what is the language, and then of course if I post in English, it doesn't mean that I'm English, but still like to understand that what are the diversities of this kind of individual simple measure like language use, we can be seeing a bit that how does the urban diversity vary spatially and temporally. And here, for example, we have been comparing the information that you would be getting from official statistics, which is this blue here, that there's not much diversity in Helsinki region, but then when you start looking the diversity from social media data, so then you see that there actually is a lot in certain areas, but it's very pocketed to certain corners of the city region. Then we have a big project by Olle Järv on border regions and border lifestyles, extending across country borders to be seeing how mobility patterns evolve in Europe. And this is super exciting, of course, because there's not much information about the mobility patterns within Schengen area, as that's not being monitored in any way. But again, from broad and long-term social media follow-ups, we are able to see that which are the active border regions, which are less active, and what kind of behaviors do we see. So for example, in the Finnish case, Estonia, like this is Finland, Estonia is here. Estonians have lower salary levels than we do. So there's a lot of workers coming across the bay to be like on a weekly basis in Finland. Then there are other types of cross-border mobilities having like monthly systems in a way. And then tourism, of course, being more sort of like one-time visits, or then regular visits, for example, these sort of people from Northern Europe living their winters in here, for example. So those kinds of patterns you start to be seeing, and those kinds of clusters of people that cross the borders, you're able to analyze from this data, and that's something that we are trying to do as well. And then this topic that I thought of more concentrating today, which is interactions with nature. So then, of course, if thinking about these mobilities of people, we are not often able to see how people use nature from statistics. National parks might make a difference in the European scale. Individual parks, individual regions might have different monitoring methods that how many visitors are here. But otherwise, like really understanding how people use inhabited areas is very difficult. And still of course, for biodiversity conservation, but also for management of tourism flows or recreational use, this would be super important information. Hello, welcome. And this is something that we now try to do in this MOBICON project, for example, which brings us here to the Canary Islands now. And there we've tried to do many different things to understand how people visit nature in indeed natural areas, but then also now more recently in another project in urban areas as well. And here the approach is more like how do we get exposed to nature during our everyday visits. Any thoughts on this? Do you want to be? This was like a general introduction of what we do, and then I thought that I'll use the rest of my maybe 15 minutes or so to just quickly tell you about the project.
How do you want to collect the data? I mean, like the social media data. I mean, it seems like there are some special kind of the route or the methodology. I was wondering how you get the data.
How do we get access to the data? Yeah, so different, this is a worry, this is the biggest worry. So if I would be listing our worries here, that would be the number one. These three platforms that we have been using in terms of social media data, so Instagram, Flickr, and Twitter or X, all of them have had during the past 10 years an API, so application programming interface, through which you can be sort of collecting the data. And they all work in a different way. So for example, at some point, Instagram allowed only to be providing a search point and then a radius from which you can be searching for the content. So then we created this kind of dotted mesh over the whole world and then collected like programmatically throughout this whole mesh the data. And now, until recently, Twitter was very well sort of developing to a very good direction in a way that they offered, first they closed their programming interface, but then they opened it for academic use and allowed us also to be going back in time. If you have been following the discussions around social media, so Elon Musk took over Twitter and turned it into X and put most of the people out, and also those who were maintaining this academic service. So basically there's no access to Twitter data at the moment because of our X data, because of that. But we have ourselves and our colleagues have been collecting a full global coverage of Twitter data. So we have huge data sets that we can analyze now until 22. Yes.
And do you use any specific software to crawling, to crawl the data or something?
We have created our own software. So, for example, for Twitter, there is something called Tweet Searcher that we've published. So maybe one thing on our sort of research group's principles is that we try to do everything as openly as we can. So all of the codes that we use to do these things are available in GitHub, which is a place to be sharing these. And also some of the data sets, like the 24-hour population for Helsinki, it's released as a data set. So anything we can release as data, as codes, so that it could be reused, we do. So Tweet Searcher is the name of that tool that we have been using to collect this one. And then the last platform, Flickr, which is a platform used a lot by people who are interested in nature photography. So that still has open access to the content. And what is nice in that is that it also allows, according to the rules, the use of the content so that we can use computer vision or other automated methods to be analyzing the content. For the other platforms, they don't allow to be, like the rules say, that we are not allowed to be using the visual content programmatically. And we haven't been doing that. So what we've tried to do is not to be breaking the rules. Now the European Union, for example, TripAdvisor is one good example that they say that you can't be using this data. But now, according to European legislation, a recent one, that says that anything that is made available on web, you are allowed also to be scraping, so collecting, even if the platform provider doesn't allow you to do that. So there are these legislative things which are very complex, like access as one thing, legislation as another thing, and so forth. So this is not at all an easy field to work on. And we are, I think, thinking whether this is a good thing that we are leaving these digital footprints all the time, and that we are so obsessed with our social media or phone, like married to the phone more than to our partners sometimes. But the thinking is that as the data is anyways being collected for private companies, we think that it would be lovely and important to be having the data used also for social good, for whatever is the social good, whether it's fair societies or more sustainable societies or fighting climate change. So this is sort of the thinking behind our work. Yes, Olli.
So you have data for individuals. So individual data for every person how this person moved from here to here. So you have macro data for every person. And don't you have any problem of personal security, so people privacy? Yeah. So we have been collecting only data which people have been posting available to everyone. So we have not been using any, for example, closed groups. Some research groups use, for example, Facebook groups where people log in to that group only and so forth. So we have been collecting only data which is available for anyone to see in any case if they browse the platform. Still, of course, there are privacy issues. So to be careful on that, so how we store our data in our databases is that we separate it. We separate the personal information, so the user, maybe if I jump a bit to this one. So we separate the user information to one place, then timestamp and geotag, like the time and space or time and location, to one place, and then the rest, like the image content and textual content, to a third table or database. And in principle, if, for example, you would like to be collaborating with us and we have data agreements, and we give out only the minimum always, like if, for example, somebody would like to do a spatio-temporal analysis of something with the data, we would hand out only those data which is needed for that analysis. There is an ID that connects all of these together, so it's pseudonymized and not anonymous data. And how we then try to do things is that we never put on our papers any personal information. We don't include real quotes, we only include our own posts as examples. We don't put any pictures taken from, as such, taken from people's posts, even if they have been posting them for everyone to see. So it's not our task to be redistributing it that way. So we analyze it spatially. We provide these broad maps. We provide broad pictures that are non-identifiable to people in the output. And then with this, like what we've tried to do this far, so we've worked with this data for some, well, almost 10 years already. And from the understanding people in nature perspective, we've sort of a very simple set of questions. We've tried to be understanding where and when people use nature, who are they in broad terms, not as persons, and then what are they doing there and why have they, what is their motivation most likely to come and visit. And then this has been, of course, published in different papers where we have been mostly, most detailed analysis we've done this far in Finland and in South Africa, and now doing work in the Canary Islands as well, which is super exciting. And these places have been important for us for the reason that we have been getting statistics from the national parks that who are the counter data, that how many people they know to be visiting based on counters or based on selling tickets to the national parks. And also we have survey data made by the authorities that why the people are visiting in which groups and so forth. So we have been able to sort of do, of course, exploratory work with the data, but always compare it with something which has been collected with other methods to see whether it makes sense or so forth. And we see that, okay, this is an example of an old paper that we had that, for example, in South Africa and Finland, Instagram, Twitter and Flickr, all the three platforms work relatively well as a surrogate of people in popular parks. Not perfectly, but still if we want to see the popularity of certain places, comparing these posts or so-called user days, which we have been calculating, and then the official numbers, we can see that we are sort of in the right direction. We know that in popular parks, popular places, this works well. In less popular, it doesn't work. And the same goes also if we if analyzing this kind of more temporal pattern of visits, so then the same holds that in less visited places, the social media posts can be much more random, of course, than the actual, compared to the actual visitation. But in popular places, also temporal patterns over the year are relatively well illustrated. And this has been then giving us some comfort to do analysis on, say, global scale. This is now thinking about human pressure on important bird and biodiversity areas. So taking the pressure information from IUCN, so from the International Union of Conservation for Nature, they provide for conservation areas this pressure information, and then we have been overlaying this with information from social media to see that where are the threats high, where are the pressures high, and then we've tried to be also explaining that what are the attractiveness or attraction factors of certain places, why people visit on a global scale these places, and know that accessibility, population density close by, and so forth is very important for these kinds of broad visitation patterns, whereas the actual species which are available or visible or living in those areas, so that's actually less important. So these kinds of analyses have been possible. And then if diving to the content more, so then as said, so this computer vision then allows us to be also analyzing the visual content, and then different methods for analyzing natural language allow us to be seeing the languages, of course, as said earlier, but then the content more broadly. And there's just some examples from Finnish national parks, but maybe I'll jump to the examples of Canary Islands, which might be interesting to you, which is a work by Matti, now currently being put to a paper, with the question of why, so this is something that we've done now with the question of why or if nature is important for the tourism of Canary Islands or for the tourists based on social media data. So what can we learn from there? And in this work, for example, what we see is that if we think that according to the official statistics by IUCN, 40% roughly of Canary Islands, excluding Natura 2000 areas, so 40% roughly is covered by these protected areas with protected area classification. And then we see that 24% of all the posts, for example in Flickr, and 18 in Instagram, the old Instagram. 23, okay, so those were so close by. Yeah, so they come from the protected areas. So that amount of posts, but then when we look at the people, like the users, we group all of the content so that it's not individual posts. So me, for example, posting 10 times, but I'm counted only once in a certain location. So then we see that 60% of users of these platforms have been posting something from a protected area. And this is then a discussion that we would like to have later on with you, that what do we learn from it. And then of course, we've had already those discussions. Last year we were visiting and presenting some of these results. We also can be seeing, indeed, based on the user information, most likely place of origin for people. We don't know about nationality, but origin of the person. And we can be seeing that which are the places with highest diversities of people with different origins, both in of course, everywhere, but then in protected areas as well. So Dunas de Las Palomas, for example, and so forth, or in Teide and so forth. So which are the diversities or diversity hotspots of the visitors according to social media? So that's always important to remember, that this is not the reality necessarily. But we have been, and Matti has been discussing the results with many experts, including Matthias, and we feel that there's something interesting in here. And then going to the content analysis, so then of course these computer vision methods are somewhat exciting in the sense that you can analyze them in many different ways. But one thing, or one approach that we've used in Finnish national parks with some interesting results, and now in Canary Islands, is this kind of semantic clustering, that the algorithm doesn't actually tell you what there is in the photo. That would be possible as well, but this is more sort of simple, more abstract in a way, that it groups the content based on similarity to different clusters. And then we have been verbalizing these partially automatically and partially ourselves, that what are the themes that are represented. So basically looking at these pictures. And these are now the original pictures, so this is the level of privacy, breaking the privacy that we provide, that these are the real pictures of people, but of course you can't see anyone's picture for real from there. But we see that there's a lot of landscapes, different types of landscapes. There's a lot of people, so people are represented a lot in social media. But then certain topics that might be of interest. And then even the broad landscape cluster is clearly sort of set to certain topics. And then when Matti has been putting these to a map, again, of course, these are data points that have coordinates, so you can see that who are they, from what country, for example, if you guess the origin from the user information, or where are they taken. So it sort of makes really a lot of sense to see how these different landscape pictures, for example, are distributed, giving us confidence that the algorithms work well in identifying the content. I might not have, I'll show you the Finnish case just briefly. So this is the Finnish clustering that we did. And we, for example, on this one, we see that there's just a couple of examples. So a lot of people orienteering in somewhere, and then a lot of dog pictures, a lot of sort of landscapes with wintry forest, or a lot of pictures with forest in summertime. So this is interesting, and then we have been labeling these pictures based on the background of these people, so whether they are Finns, locals, or whether they are foreigners, tourists most likely, based on the user information. And we see, for example, that the blue is more Finns represented, the more red, the more like tourists are represented. Wintry forests are sort of very much from the foreigners, from the visitors. In a way obvious, but still quite nice to be visually showing it. Then, for example, the orienteering pictures are all from Finns. No foreign orienteers there. Dog pictures were a surprise to us because we thought that it's like dog walking, that they are Finns, of course. But no, they were not. And there's sort of husky safaris organized in Lapland, and there was like huge amount of pictures from those husky safaris, and the dogs came from there, of course. So these kind of things which sort of give you food for thought, nothing very specific in terms of answers, like if you look at these clouds, you can't say that much sort of definite, anything definite, but you can be sort of getting food for thought on some of the patterns that you see. Now I'm conscious of time, so maybe to sort of close this MOBICON project. So what we try to do now is sort of move from what we've done for a long time to be answering to these questions in terms of what is now. So to be understanding that how do things change over time. So how, in terms of outdoor recreation and nature-based tourism, so what changes do we see? There's a lot of problems or difficulties methodologically in a way in using these data sources in that kind of analysis. So we try to be figuring out how can we be actually understanding change in where, when people visit nature, how the user groups or visitation groups change, and how do the motivations or activities change. And we feel that this is something that we have to be really sort of building a new methodology to be doing this. We also want to know that what kind of information is actually needed by those who are managing these areas. And this is why we have a workshop now here in Las Palmas that Matthias has been doing a huge work to be bringing people from different islands who are managing the different protected areas or natural areas. And we are discussing with them these matters as well. What are their knowledge needs as well? So where should we be putting effort in the methodological development? And then as we have conservation scientists in the group as well, so we try to be understanding also impacts to biodiversity conservation on all of this, like when things happen. So how does it impact biodiversity conservation, and then how is it related to climate change as well, which is Matti's thesis. And this is from Finland. We organized a workshop in there. Aina Brias is leading our workshop here in Canary Islands as well, and she's just on her way here now to the campus, and we'll have next Tuesday a discussion about these topics with the people who are knowledgeable. So our thinking somehow is that in order to be tackling these sort of questions or to be getting more knowledge about it, we can be doing, of course, analysis with big data. So that's something that we have been sort of okay-ish or good at this far, but also like really to be discussing the results and the information needs with people who actually are working on certain locations and have huge knowledge about that. So we are now combining this big data analytics to workshop and interview type of methodology. Yep, so that's MOBICON in brief. What I wanted to show to you, but don't now have time, is an ERC Consolidator Grant project that we got to be analyzing also people's mobilities in urban environment and how they get exposed to nature. And we are doing there a lot of interesting stuff, trying to understand how greenery or nature is important for people in urban context, and trying to understand seasons, trying to map things which are important for people from human scale, trying to be linking people's detailed mobility patterns to this environmental information that we gain, to be understanding who has access to good environments, and then to be seeing if this access to green travel environment is equitably available. And why I'm saying this project is that we work in the European scale in all big cities in Europe, but then have focused on 5 cities more in detail: Helsinki, Copenhagen, London, Munich and Las Palmas. And the first results from Las Palmas are now coming up, so it's super exciting for us, of course. I'll say this to you still. So this is an analysis of people's everyday trips, and we use school trips as an example of that. And have been seeing that who has good access to schools and for whom the access is through green or beautiful environments. Green is what we have been measuring for real. So we see that Helsinki has very green environments, but the actual access, the distances along the route network are long. Whereas in Las Palmas it's quite the opposite. You're on the sort of other end. You don't have that much greenery, at least according to our mapping methods, but the schools are super accessible, like close by to people. So that's where I end. But still, MOBICON is now what we are working more on in here. And then still greetings from the whole group to all of you. Yes. So that's where I'll finish. So now then.
Many.
Yeah.
Well, with the group here in TIDES, we worked in the Soclipan project with some of big data, but we are talking about 5 or 6 years ago. So, but we use data from Instagram and data from, and I would like to ask you one thing, because we tried also to access data from mobile phones companies, and it was impossible for us, at least in Italy. Although we had a colleague with an internal contact with Telecom Italia, which is there, and but we could not access the data directly. They should have extracted for us, and it was very expensive.
Yeah.
Plus, for privacy reasons, they could not give us the trajectory of each number on the territory, but also the number of phones connected to a specific cell in every, for example, every moment of the day. So I wonder if you have been able to access different data, and you could, because I saw one of the last slides, you could also trace a kind of movement of people. Would it be possible with your data?
Well, yes and no. So that movement data is based on shared bicycle system, so it's bikers who use bicycle of the shared bicycle system. So that's not from mobile phone data. So what we have, like how we have solved this is that we have not. We struggle with the same situation. And of course, if wanting to do more global analysis or crossing the borders, it always becomes difficult because the mobile phone operators are regional or national level operators or a bit broader. So that's one thing. And that was the reason why we originally started using social media data. We wanted to do mobile phone analysis, but because of these reasons, we thought that there must be something else to understand these broader patterns, and then we went for social media data. But how we have been solving this, like in these examples, for example, we have been using mobile phone data, and in some others as well. So there's 2 major mobile phone companies operating in Finland who somehow provide us access to data. So one has been creating these kind of anonymized data sets that they offer with high price, but we have been able to negotiate free to use access to that data. It's anonymized in a manner that prevents it to be used for some questions. So we can be, for example, seeing the amount of people in certain places. And then we have been comparing that to the official statistics that are very good in Finland. So then we see like overrepresentation and underrepresentation. We saw also the actual mobility patterns, but only within 1 day. So they always sort of anonymize, like 1 day is like an analysis slot, and then you can't be tracing over days. So if we are now here, when we came, we would be in this kind of thinking, moving from Finland to here in that 1 day. But now we are locals, according to this kind of thinking. So there's a challenge in that data set. Then we have one PhD researcher who sits in the other company, who works there. And he's the data analyst or data operator, and he has been anonymizing us. Like we develop study questions together, and then he does the actual data processing and delivers us the answer, like the statistics that are anonymized enough, when he has time, because his work is for real something else. And with this kind of collaboration, we have been able, for example, to analyze the mobility patterns better, much better, and then the demographies of people in nature, for example. So as people do the contract with the mobile phone operators, so then of course there's also the date of birth. So with that date of birth information, we've then been able to see, for example, that after COVID, Finnish national parks were crowded with younger people than ever earlier. And these kinds of things are visible there. So 5-year slots, 5-year demographic slots we've been able to extract to those analyses. But through very sort of personal connections and like always taking a lot of time. With the one company now having the service available, we started the negotiations in 2012 and they are still ongoing. So it's really like, it's a marathon. They still say that yes, we can advance these discussions, but it's a bit tedious. Yeah.
It seems like there is a task to be undertaken. It's like to create a common with the information, which is interesting for many people, as this is a very multidisciplinary tool that can be used for many people. And maybe to create a pool of buyers in order to get information, but cheaper for anyone, for each one.
Yeah.
I think this is a task to be undertaken in order to because otherwise it's so expensive.
Yeah, and to be solving these issues, because the thing is that the data is being produced, we do produce it, the data is being collected, so somebody holds it and analyzes it, and not always for our best. So therefore, like, it really, really should be made available for research. Of course, respecting privacy, preserving that and all that, but still there's such a huge potential of understanding the dynamics of people with these data that we are really missing the possibility in Europe and elsewhere as well. But maybe European legislation recently has not made it any easier to do this, and therefore the companies are very sort of restricted as well of giving any access to the data, because the legislation is so tight.
No, because I talked with the director of National Park in Lanzarote. He told me he have a kind of hypothesis about different profiles of visitors to different national parks in the Canary Islands. So all of them are national parks, but even so, not the same, the relationship between the visitors and the spaces. And his opinion is that, for example, in Lanzarote, most of people develop a relationship like they are visiting a recreative park with, camels, and then you put water in some hole, and then you have an explosion of water vapor, something like this. It's like a, you know. And many people in the other stream, in La Palma, for example, they are more naturalist, they seek more intimate connection with nature and so on. My question is, with the content analyzing, you can prove hypotheses like those about the different profiles of visitors in the same, maybe same
Yes.
ground of the same type of protected area.
Yes, so this is something that we have a hypothesis as well that this is the case, and have now in May a new PhD researcher starting with that exact theme. In a way, we were part of this kind of big Marie Curie doctoral network and got a PhD position in that. And she will be starting in doing exactly this kind of profiling, where, well, like which is the study area and so on. We haven't yet decided. He's only now recruited, but it's something that we've done already earlier in our previous project to some extent. But we really think that this provides new ways of grouping people, so like going beyond gender and age and those kinds of things which the surveys often ask, but really to see that what are the profiles of people, that are they, for example, people who also like, well, I could give you some examples, but I don't have them in the slides. So mobility patterns are quite revealing. Like if people, when we see that which kind of places they visit, so if they visit many, so there might be like a group of people who like to be going to less like theme park-like places. So these kinds of naturalists. It's not that they go only to La Palma, but it might be that they go to La Palma, El Hierro, to certain more remote places. And with this visitation pattern already, we could be saying that they belong to a group like this. And then there are these others who go to Loro Park and the other sort of even like real theme parks that we also have in our data, or that the pictures come from Poema del Mar, for example, or that they go to Lanzarote, to Timanfaya to do these activities. So we could be from the content be separating this. How we should be doing and what is interesting, what we should be doing, like because of the knowledge need, is something that we are very curious about, and I'm hoping that the workshop, for example, would be giving us understanding that what should we do in that respect, what would be interesting. Because we can do many things, like technically you can do many things, but is it meaningful is something that we always ask. But already from here, for example, like these things that we now have also from the Canaries. So this clustering of different photos, different photos that relate to activities often. So how do they distribute spatially, and then how do they distribute to different groups? So that can be already analyzed, and then many of these photos are taken by the same person, which we know in a way, we have that information. So then whether there's a combination of wintry forest and sledge riding, or whether there's a remote island photo with some insects, for example, or another with insects or rare birds or something like that. So then you could be identifying that there is this kind of naturalist versus a sort of experience seeker represented in there. So there's a lot of potential, but we haven't seen that would have been done really yet.
More questions?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.